The morning sun cast long shadows across the Afghan mountains as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her Barrett 50 caliber sniper rifle for the third time. Her hands moved with practiced precision, even though her heart hammered against her ribs. 2 miles below, 12 Navy SEALs were walking into what intelligence suggested might be a trap. Maria had been the best marksman in her unit back at Fort Bragg. When the call came for volunteer snipers to support a high-priority SEAL mission, she didn't hesitate. Now, perched on a rocky outcrop with her spotter Jake beside her, she wondered if her skills would be enough for what was coming. The mission seemed straightforward on paper. The SEALs needed to extract a high-value target from a compound in the valley. Intelligence reports indicated light resistance, maybe a dozen Taliban fighters at most. Maria's job was overwatch, providing long-range support if things went sideways. Through her scope, she watched the SEAL team move like ghosts through the early morning mist. Their leader, Lieutenant Commander Rick Hayes, had briefed her personally before the mission. His eyes held the kind of intensity that comes from years of dangerous operations. But there was something else there too. Worry, maybe. Or intuition. "Something doesn't feel right about this one," he had told her. "Intelligence has been sketchy lately. Too many variables. If we get into trouble down there, you and that Barrett might be the only thing standing between us and a very bad day." Maria had nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. 12 lives depending on her ability to put rounds on target from over a mile away. She had trained for this, lived for this moment. But training never fully prepared you for the real thing. Jake's voice crackled through her earpiece. Movement at 2 o'clock, about 800 meters from the compound. He was scanning with binoculars, his job to spot targets and call adjustments for her shots. Maria swiveled her rifle, peering through the powerful scope. 3 figures moving between rocks, carrying what looked like heavy equipment. Not the casual movement of farmers or herders. These men moved with purpose, with military discipline. "I see them," she whispered into her radio. "Looks like they're setting up some kind of position." The SEAL team was still 40 minutes out from the compound. If this was an ambush, it was well coordinated. Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Over the next 20 minutes, she spotted more movement. Groups of fighters taking positions in a rough circle around the compound. What should have been a simple extraction was turning into a nightmare. The SEALs were walking into a carefully prepared kill zone. "Base, this is Overwatch." Maria called into her radio, using her mission call sign. "I count at least 30 hostiles in prepared positions around the target building. Recommend mission abort." Static filled her earpiece before Lieutenant Commander Hayes' voice came through. "Overwatch. We copy your count. Mission is still a go. The target has intelligence that cannot fall into enemy hands. We're proceeding as planned." Maria's stomach dropped. 30 against 12 were terrible odds, even for Navy SEALs. But she understood. Sometimes, the mission mattered more than the risks. Sometimes you had to trust in training, teamwork, and a little bit of luck. As the SEALs approached the compound, Maria tracked multiple targets through her scope. The Barrett 50 was a powerful weapon, capable of taking down vehicles or punching through walls. But she only had 20 rounds. In a prolonged firefight, ammunition would become precious quickly. "First target acquired," she reported, settling her crosshairs on a Taliban fighter who was positioning what looked like an RPG launcher. Range, 1,400 meters. The mathematics of long-range shooting ran through her mind automatically. Wind speed, humidity, temperature, the rotation of the Earth itself, all factors that could mean the difference between a clean hit and a miss that might cost American lives. The SEAL team reached the outer perimeter of the compound. Through her scope, Maria could see them moving in perfect coordination. Years of training evident in every step, but she could also see the trap closing around them. Taliban fighters were shifting positions, creating overlapping fields of fire. Then the first shot rang out from the valley below. The ambush had begun, and Maria Santos found herself holding the trigger of the most important weapon in the fight. 12 Navy SEALs were counting on her, and she had 19 rounds left to make the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. She took a deep breath, let half of it out, and began to squeeze the trigger. The Barrett roared to life, its massive muzzle blast echoing across the mountains. Through her scope, she watched her first target drop, the RPG launcher clattering uselessly down the mountainside. "Target down," she called into her radio. 18 rounds remaining. The real fight was just beginning. The valley erupted into chaos as machine gun fire echoed off the rocky walls. Maria watched through her scope as muzzle flashes bloomed from dozens of positions around the compound. The SEALs had taken cover behind a low stone wall, but they were pinned down and heavily outnumbered. "Overwatch, we need immediate fire support." Lieutenant Commander Hayes' voice cut through the radio static. "Machine gun nest at our 11 o'clock. Approximately 200 meters. Maria swung her rifle toward the position. Through her scope, she could see 3 Taliban fighters behind a heavy machine gun, raking the SEALs' position with sustained fire. The Barrett's crosshairs settled on the gunner's center mass. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the massive, .50 caliber round crossing the distance in less than 2 seconds. The machine gunner pitched backward, and the deadly chatter of automatic fire stopped abruptly. "Machine gun neutralized," Maria reported. 17 rounds left. But as soon as one threat was eliminated, 2 more seemed to take its place. Taliban fighters were moving through the rocks, like ants, trying to encircle the SEAL team. Maria worked methodically, picking off the most dangerous targets, but for every fighter she dropped, more appeared. Jake spotted movement on a ridge above the compound. Multiple hostiles with RPGs, 600 meters northeast of the SEALs. He called out. Maria shifted her aim, finding 3 fighters setting up rocket-propelled grenade launchers. If those RPGs found their mark, the mission would be over. She fired rapidly, working the bolt action as fast as possible. 3 shots, 3 kills, but her ammunition was dropping fast. 14 rounds remaining, she announced, trying to keep the worry out of her voice. Down in the valley, the SEALs had managed to fight their way into the compound, but they were taking heavy casualties. 2 men were down, and the rest were running low on ammunition. The extraction was taking longer than planned, and more Taliban fighters were arriving every minute. "Overwatch, we've got vehicles approaching from the south," Hayes called out. "Technicals with mounted weapons." Maria turned her scope toward the southern approach to the valley. 3 pickup trucks armed with heavy machine guns were racing toward the compound, kicking up clouds of dust. If those vehicles reached the SEALs' position, the lightweight cover they had taken behind wouldn't protect them from the massive firepower. She focused on the lead vehicle, tracking it as it bounced over the rough terrain. The Barrett was designed for long-range precision, not moving targets. But Maria had trained for this scenario. She led the truck slightly, accounting for its speed and direction. The rifle roared, and the heavy round punched through the truck's engine block. Steam erupted from under the hood as the vehicle ground to a halt, blocking the narrow road and forcing the other trucks to stop. The gunners on the remaining trucks turned their weapons toward her position on the mountainside. Maria heard the distinctive whistle of bullets passing overhead as the enemy tried to suppress her. "They've spotted us," Jake said, his voice tight with tension. "We need to relocate." "Negative," Maria replied, settling her scope on the gunner in the second truck. "The SEALs need continuous fire support. We stay until they're clear." She fired again, and the second gunner slumped over his weapon. The third truck's crew was trying to maneuver around the disabled lead vehicle when Maria's next shot found the driver. The truck veered off the road and crashed into a boulder. "Vehicles neutralized," she reported. 11 rounds left, but the situation in the valley was getting worse. The SEALs had secured their target. A Taliban commander with crucial intelligence about upcoming attacks, but they were completely surrounded. Radio chatter indicated that more enemy reinforcements were en route. "Overwatch, we're going to need a fighting withdrawal," Hayes transmitted. "Can you provide cover fire for our exfiltration route?" Maria studied the terrain through her scope. The planned extraction route ran along a narrow valley floor, with enemy positions on both sides, offering perfect ambush opportunities. The SEALs would be exposed for nearly half a mile as they fought their way to the landing zone. "I can cover the route, but I'm running low on ammunition," she replied honestly. 11 rounds for a half-mile corridor with multiple enemy positions. There was a pause before Hayes responded. "Understood. Overwatch. Make every shot count. We're moving. In 2 minutes." Maria felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. 11 rounds to keep 12 Navy SEALs alive during the most dangerous part of their mission. In her mind, she began calculating which targets posed the greatest threat and planning her shots accordingly. Jake was scanning the route with his binoculars, calling out enemy positions. "I count at least 15 hostiles along the exfil route. Some of them have crew-served weapons. 15 targets, 11 bullets." The math was simple and terrifying. Maria would have to choose carefully, prioritizing the most dangerous threats and hoping the SEALs could handle the rest with their remaining ammunition. Through her scope, she watched as the SEAL team prepared to move. They formed up in a tight formation, the wounded supported by their teammates, moving with the fluid precision that marked elite special operations forces. But she could see the exhaustion in their movements, the way they favored injuries, the careful conservation of ammunition. "Moving now," Hayes transmitted. The SEALs burst from cover and began their fighting withdrawal. Immediately, enemy fire erupted from positions along the valley walls. Maria began her deadly work, each shot carefully aimed and deliberately fired. A sniper here, a machine gunner there. An RPG team setting up for a shot that could destroy the entire SEAL team. With each pull of the trigger, her ammunition count dropped. 10 rounds. 9. 8. The targets seemed endless. But she forced herself to be selective, taking only the shots that mattered most. Halfway through the withdrawal, disaster struck. A hidden Taliban position opened fire from directly ahead of the SEALs' route, catching them in a deadly crossfire. Maria could see Hayes on the radio, probably calling for air support. But the nearest aircraft were still 20 minutes away. 20 minutes the SEALs didn't have, not with 7 rounds left in her rifle and more enemies appearing every second. The Barrett 50 was about to earn its reputation as the weapon that saved 12 American heroes. 7 rounds left. The hidden Taliban position had the SEAL team pinned down in a deadly crossfire just 300 meters from the extraction zone. Maria could see muzzle flashes from at least 6 different weapons, all concentrated on the small depression where Hayes and his men had taken cover. Through her scope, she identified the biggest threat immediately. A Taliban fighter with a PKM machine gun was systematically shredding the rocks that provided the SEALs' only protection. His sustained fire was keeping the Americans pinned while other fighters maneuvered to flank them. Maria's first shot took out the machine gunner, the heavy .50 caliber round, ending the deadly chatter of automatic fire. 6 rounds remaining, but the respite was brief. More Taliban fighters were closing in from 3 directions, and Maria could see RPG teams setting up for shots that would finish the trapped SEALs. Her next 2 shots eliminated the rocket teams, but now she was down to 4 rounds with at least a dozen enemy fighters still active. "Overwatch. We're taking heavy casualties down here," Hayes transmitted. His voice strained. "Johnson's hit bad, and we're almost out of ammunition." Maria felt her heart sink. Through her scope, she could see one of the SEALs lying motionless, while his teammates returned sporadic fire with their few remaining magazines. The Taliban fighters sensed weakness and were pressing their attack. "Jake, I need you to spot every remaining target," she said to her partner. "I've got 4 shots to clear a path to the landing zone." Jake's binoculars swept the battlefield methodically. Sniper team on the ridge at 2 o'clock, about 400 meters. Another machine gun position directly ahead of the SEALs at 300 meters. And there's a squad of fighters moving to flank from the left, maybe 250 meters. 4 targets, 4 bullets. Maria steadied her breathing and focused on the sniper team first. 2 Taliban marksmen with scoped rifles were taking careful aim at the pinned Americans. Her crosshairs found the first sniper, and the Barrett spoke with its distinctive boom. The second sniper turned toward her muzzle flash, trying to locate her position. Maria worked the bolt smoothly and fired again. Another clean hit. 2 rounds remaining. The machine gun ahead of the SEALs opened fire again, forcing Hayes and his men to stay down just when they needed to move. Maria shifted her aim to the gunner's position. The heavy machine gun was partially protected by a stone wall, but she could see enough of the operator to take the shot. The .50 caliber round punched through the stone barrier and found its target. The machine gun fell silent. 1 round left, but the flanking squad was still moving, and they were almost in position to overrun the SEAL team. Maria could see 5 Taliban fighters advancing through the rocks. Their AK-47 seconds ready. With only 1 bullet remaining, she couldn't stop them all. Then she remembered something her instructor had told her back at sniper school. Sometimes the biggest impact doesn't come from hitting your target, but from what your target hits when it falls. The flanking squad was moving through a narrow gap between 2 large boulders. Above them, Maria could see a pile of loose rocks balanced precariously on a small ledge. If she could hit the right spot with enough force, physics would do the rest. She adjusted her aim upward, focusing on a key stone that seemed to be supporting the entire rock pile. It was a desperate gamble, but with 5 enemy fighters about to overrun the SEALs, it was the only option left. Maria took a deep breath, let half of it out, and squeezed the trigger for the last time. The Barrett's massive muzzle blast echoed across the valley as her final round screamed toward the rocks above the Taliban squad. The .50 caliber bullet struck the supporting stone with tremendous force, shattering it instantly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then gravity took over, and tons of loose rock began to cascade down the mountainside. The Taliban fighters looked up in terror as an avalanche of stone crashed down on them. The narrow gap they had been using to approach the SEALs disappeared under a pile of boulders, taking the flanking squad with it. "Path is clear," Maria called into her radio. "Move now. I'm out of ammunition." The SEAL team needed no further encouragement. Hayes led his men in a final sprint toward the landing zone, carrying their wounded teammate between them. With the immediate threats eliminated, they made it the final 300 meters without taking additional casualties. As the helicopter touched down to extract the team, Maria felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion wash over her. 20 rounds had seemed like so much ammunition when the mission began. Now she understood why every sniper instructor had drilled into her the importance of making each shot count. "Outstanding work up there, Overwatch," Hayes transmitted as the helicopter lifted off. "That last shot was pure genius. You saved all our lives today." Maria watched through her scope as the helicopter disappeared into the distance, carrying 12 Navy SEALs and their precious intelligence cargo to safety. The mission had been a success, but barely. If she had missed any of those critical shots, if she had hesitated for even a second, the outcome would have been very different. 3 months later, Maria received a commendation for her actions that day. The citation mentioned her exceptional marksmanship under extreme pressure and her critical contribution to mission success. But for Maria, the real reward came in a letter from Lieutenant Commander Hayes. "Staff Sergeant Santos," it read, "I wanted you to know that the intelligence we extracted that day led to the prevention of 3 major terrorist attacks, potentially saving hundreds of civilian lives. Your 20 shots with the Barrett .50 didn't just save 12 Navy SEALs. They saved countless innocent people who will never know how close they came to tragedy." Maria kept that letter in her rifle case, a reminder that sometimes a single person with the right skills and the courage to use them can change the course of history. She had learned that day that being surrounded and running out of bullets doesn't mean the fight is over. Sometimes it just means you have to make your last few shots count for everything. The Barrett .50 had indeed spoken volumes for the SEALs. and its voice had been heard around the world, in the hands of a skilled marksman with the courage to stay at her post when retreat would have been easier. 20 rounds of ammunition had been enough to turn the tide of battle and bring 12 American heroes home alive.